Francisco Pizarro. Francisco Pizarro, circa 1478 to 1541, was a conquistador who led the Spanish conquest of the Inca civilization from 1532. With only a small group of men, Pizarro took advantage of his superior weapons and the fact that the Incas were weakened by civil war and the arrival of European diseases to take over the largest empire in the world. Pizarro captured the Inca capital of Cusco, executed the Inca ruler Atahualpa, and exploited the widespread discontent with Inca rule by indigenous South Americans. Things then fell apart for the invaders when they began to fight amongst themselves for the glittering riches of a crumbling empire. Pizarro was murdered in his home in Lima by a rival Spanish faction in June 1541. Early life. Francisco Pizarro was born in 1478 in Trujillo, Extremadura, Spain. Of humble background, Francisco was the illegitimate son of Gonzalo Pizarro, died in 1522, a Spanish colonel. His mother, Francisca González y Mateos, was the daughter of a local farmer. Growing up in circumstances that did not allow him to attend school or be accepted by society, Francisco never even learnt to read or write. With few advantages to a life in Spain, it is little surprise that Francisco, like many of his generation, was attracted by the promise of fame and fortune offered by the New World. In 1502, Francisco sailed with Nicolas de Ovando, born in 1451, to Hispaniola, modern Dominican Republic or Haiti, a Spanish colony since 1494. By 1509, Francisco had moved on to the mainland, where he joined the expedition led by Alonso de Ojeda, 1468 to 1515, to the Gulf of Uraba off the coast of what is today Colombia. Packing in the sights, if not the riches of the New World, Francisco joined the expedition of Vasco Núñez de Balboa, 1475 to 1519, to cross the Isthmus of Panama in 1513. Francisco, therefore, became one of the first Europeans to see the Pacific Ocean. He then settled in Panama and enjoyed a successful political career there, serving as a magistrate and the inspector of encomiendas, the right to exploit local forced labor in a specific area. The first expedition south. Well established and well connected in Panama, Pizarro was able to think about launching his own expeditions of discovery. Rumors drifted north that a great and golden empire lay in the unknown lands to the south. Pizarro raised the necessary funds to lead an expedition there in 1524-5. He explored the northern coast of South America and attempted to sail up the Bairu River but could make little headway against difficult winds and currents. The group then met a hostile tribe at Punta Quemado, where Pizarro received 7 wounds and a number of his men were killed. Pizarro launched another expedition in March 1526. Sailing to the San Juan River, Pizarro marched inland but was this time blocked by swamps. Meanwhile, Pizarro's pilot, Bartolomé Ruiz, had sailed across the equator, the first European to do so in the Pacific, where he had come across a balsa craft loaded with trade goods, including gold artifacts. At last, the conquistadors had a sign that riches could be theirs if only they could find the source. Ignoring orders from the governor to return to Panama, Pizarro kept a volunteer force and sailed on to the Gulf of Guayaquil, where the coasts of Ecuador and Peru meet. There he discovered the bustling port of Tumbes. Here was further evidence of the presence of a great civilization and that there really was something in South America worth going after. First, he would have to return to Spain and obtain royal approval for his next and larger expedition to try and emulate the discoveries of his compatriot Hernán Cortés, 1485 to 1547, in Mexico, who had conquered the Aztec civilization. Pizarro was already into his 50s, this would be his last shot at fame and glory. Conquest of the Incas. In July 1529, Pizarro was successful in demonstrating the potential of South America for the Spanish crown. First, he was made a Knight of Santiago and then he was awarded the status of Adelantado, which was the legal right given by the King of Spain, Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, 1519-56, to become the governor of any new lands he colonized there. Pizarro could also keep 4/5 of the wealth acquired in the process. His other obligations included building fortresses to keep possession of the new colony he established and taking clergymen to spread Christianity. Pizarro organized his third expedition throughout 1530, and he set off once more into the unknown in December of that year. Pizarro led fewer than 200 fighting men to the Andes. His second in command was Diego de Almagro, circa 1475 to 1538, who had been on his two previous voyages south. Sailing from Panama down the coast of Colombia and Ecuador in two caravel ships, the Europeans pillaged all along the way, the team marching on land being shadowed by the ships off the coast. Pizarro waited for reinforcements at Coque, Ecuador, in February 1531 so that his force eventually numbered 260 men. The mini-army slowly marched south, conquered Tums in February 1532, and then struck inland. The invaders noted the well-built roads and storehouses along the way, sure indicators they were encroaching into the lands of a wealthy empire. Finally, on November 15, 1532, first contact was made with the Inca people, and Pizarro sent word he wished to speak with their king at Cajamarca in the highlands of Peru. Two factors would help Pizarro enormously in his conquest. The first was the epidemic of European diseases that had already reached South America from Mexico and Central America. This wave killed a staggering 65 to 90% of the population. The Inca ruler Huayna Capac had himself succumbed in 1528, and this led to the second point in the conquistador's favor, the inherent fragility of the Inca Empire. Huayna Capac's two sons, Huáscar and Atahualpa, now fought each other for control of the empire, then the largest in the world but woefully imbalanced, with 40,000 Incas ruling 10 million subject people. The damaging civil war, which lasted 6 years, highlighted the struggle the Incas had in trying to control a vast empire of many subject peoples who were not at all keen on being ruled by the Incas, who imposed their taxes, religion, and even art on conquered peoples. The Inca fight back, Cusco and Lima. Pizarro now turned his attention to the wider empire and the hope of golden cities ripe for the taking. Reconnaissance missions were sent out in all directions, and one of the most interesting was led by Pizarro's son Hernando, who reported of a great city of gold and silver to the south. This was Cusco, the Inca capital. The city was the administrative, religious, and literal geographical center of the Inca world, with the sacred Coricancha complex, large ceremonial plazas, and the massive Sacsayhuaman fortress. With help from local peoples eager to see the fall of the Incas, Pizarro marched to Cusco, and the city was taken with ease on November 15, 1533. The Coricancha was stripped of its golden sheeting, and anything else of value was pocketed, from exotic feathers to emeralds. Sharing out the spoils with his men, Pizarro was eager to find more treasure cities. He left Cusco in the hands of his sons and a puppet Inca ruler while he headed for the coast. On January 18, 1535, Pizarro established Ciudad de los Reyes, Lima, named to honor the Spanish monarch and the Magi of the Bible story, since the Spanish arrived on the day of Epiphany. Lima now became the main Spanish stronghold and eventually the capital of the Viceroyalty of Peru. As 1535 wore on, unsettling developments occurred, which pitched Pizarro and his deputy Almagro into an even fiercer state of rivalry. Pizarro had made Almagro lieutenant governor of Cusco in January 1535, but the deputy wanted much more than this. Even worse, Charles V now decided that the new colony should be split between Pizarro and Almagro, with the former taking the northern half and Almagro the southern half. Just who controlled Cusco in this plan, located roughly in the middle, was left dangerously unclear. As a consequence of his new right to half the colony, Almagro left Cusco in July to explore what is today Chile and what became known to the Spanish as New Toledo. Meanwhile, back in Cusco, Pizarro's second puppet Inca ruler proved a disaster. The first had died of illness. Manco Inca Yupanqui, Manco Inca, had been crowned by Pizarro himself on November 16, 1533. Manco, pushed by his people to react against the avaricious invaders, left Cusco on the pretext of taking a religious pilgrimage but then returned with an army to encircle the city. The siege of Cusco in 1536–7 involved tens of thousands of Inca warriors attacking their own capital, now held by a force of fewer than 200 fighting Spaniards supported by perhaps 2,000 local peoples who were against the Incas. On May 6, Manco Inca ordered a full-scale assault. The Sacsayhuaman fortress was taken, and hot stones were fired by sling into the thatched roofs of the city below, causing a massive and destructive fire to rage. The Spanish cavalry proved, as usual, to be all but invincible, and the Europeans survived the attacks and even began to make forays out of the city for vital supplies. The Inca armies, made up mostly of conscripted farmers, could not stay in the field indefinitely, and Manco Inca was obliged to lift and then restart the siege once the harvests had been brought in. In the meantime, Pizarro sent 2 relief columns from Lima, but both were wiped out. Pizarro was later criticized for not waiting to form a single larger force to relieve the capital. A third force composed of reinforcements from Central America and the return of Almagro from Chile ensured the conquistadors held on to the prize of Cusco in April 1537. New Castile. On June 26, 1541, Pizarro was stabbed to death in his home by a group loyal to Almagro, which included the latter's son. The Marquis' body was interred in the Cathedral of Lima. Pizarro had been the victim of his own political machinations and had finally fallen, not at the hands of the people he had conquered, but at the hands of his own people. Gonzalo Pizarro now named himself his brother's successor and so became the governor of Peru, but Almagro's son still claimed rights over Cusco. The stalemate was not finally resolved until September 1542 and the arrival of Cristobal Vaca de Castro with orders from Spain that he take up the position as governor of Peru, but even then the infighting rumbled on until the Spanish crown took full control of its colony in 15